ship is ours!
Yes, the ship is yours, but let's talk about what that really means. First up, maintenance costs. A ship isn't like a car, it's a floating city. Then there's the endless supplies of paint to keep the rust away. Let's not forget, those sails don't come cheap either. Oh, and crew wages if you don't want to swap the deck yourself. And of course, insurance. Imagine the premiums on a ship of this size. You'd need the treasure of a few dozen pirate ships just to keep it covered. And in case the ship does end up underwater, guess who's on the hook for all those beautiful, expensive yachts and ships you accidentally bump into? You. Unless, of course, you've got yourself a ship that doesn't sink. But how does that even work? How does a massive hunk of metal stay afloat and not just sink like a rock? Let's dive into the science behind it. Here's the secret. It's all thanks to physics and some clever design.
Are we not king's men? Aye! Aye! On the king's mission? Aye! Aye!
So buckle up, because we're about to uncover how ships float, why they don't sink, and all the little tricks keeping these vessels right on top of the water. For the answer, we have to go back, way back, like on toga and sandals back. Meet Archimedes of Syracuse. This ancient Greek scientist had a major eureka moment when he realized that the water level rose as he lowered himself into his bathtub. What he discovered in that bath is now known as Archimedes Principle. He realized that when an object is placed in water, it displaces a certain amount of that water. If the weight of the water displaced is greater than the object's weight, the object floats. It's like an invisible lifeguard holding the ship up from below. So, let's break it down in plain English. Imagine your ship is like a giant ice cube in a big drink. If the ship pushes away more water than it weighs, it'll stay on top. If not, well, it's headed for Davy Jones's locker. Alright, so when you put a ship in water, it's actually fighting a tug of war between two forces. On one hand, we have gravity, pulling down. On the other, we have buoyant force, pushing up. Gravity's saying, hey, sink. But buoyant force replies, nope, stay right here. And if buoyant force wins out, voila, floating ship. Now you might be thinking, great, my ship displaces water, so it's all smooth sailing from here, right? Well, not so fast. Archimedes' Principle will only get you so far. If a ship isn't engineered properly, if it's overloaded, off balance, or you know...
Mermaids, Captain. Aye, mermaids. Seagulls, devilfish, dreadful in hunger for flesh of man.
Exactly. Or has holes in the hull, things can go wrong. Really wrong. And if you're on board a poorly designed vessel, let's just say you might want to start brushing up on your backstroke.
We're going to end up in the Hudson.
Too low.
Sometimes, like our heroic captain here, the best you can do is land where the water's shallow, which brings us to hull design, one of the most crucial elements in keeping a vessel above the waterline.
Evacuate!
Not all hulls are created equal. The shape, weight distribution, and even the material all affects a ship's stability and buoyancy. Flat-bottom hulls, for instance, are great for stability in calm waters. Think of river barges, but they're a nightmare in choppy seas. V-shaped hulls, on the other hand, cut through waves like butter and help maintain stability in rougher waters. And then there are round-bottom hulls, which are super buoyant and efficient, but get ready to roll with the waves. So, what happens if the hull isn't up to scratch? You're basically adding your ship's name to the National Underwater Monuments Registry. Hull design is that important. Good hull design means engineering for buoyancy, stability, and durability. It's the difference between smoothly crossing the seas and, well, planning an unplanned submarine tour.
Rechnung stimmt? Jawohl, richtig. Für mich gibt's nichts Schöneres als ein U-Boot.
Of course, if your idea of beautiful involves diving hundreds of feet underwater in a giant pressurized tube with no windows. But hey, submarines really are engineering marvels. They've taken Archimedes' Principle to the next level, literally, to the depths of the ocean. So how do submarines do what ships can't? Sink and resurface on command. The secret lies in ballast tanks. These are special compartments on the submarine that can fill with water to make it sink, or with air to make it rise. When it's time to dive, they flood the ballast tanks, adding weight and reducing buoyancy. And when it's time to surface, they pump the water out, fill the tanks with air, and up they go. It's like having your very own built-in water elevator. The key difference between a regular ship and a submarine is control over buoyancy. While ships are designed to stay right at the surface, submarines are built to do the opposite. Their design focuses on withstanding pressure from all sides, so they can dive deep without getting squished like a soda can. Submarines have thick, rounded hulls to handle the intense pressure down there. You can't just stick a ship underwater. It's like wearing flip-flops on a mountain hike. It just doesn't work. So, whether it's a sleek yacht riding the waves or a submarine cruising the depths, each vessel is a floating or sinking lesson in physics, engineering, and the very human desire to take control of the waters. A ship isn't just heavy, it's smartly heavy. It's designed to maximize the amount of water it displaces without weighing down the vessel, because spreading the steel into a hollow shape lets it displace way more water, increasing buoyant force. Here's another trick to keep our ship afloat: density. Density is just a fancy word for how much stuff you're packing into a certain space. In other words, it's the difference between a light, fluffy cake and one of those ultra-dense fudge brownies. Ships are made to be less dense than the water they sit in. Imagine if you could whip up steel like meringue. Super fluffy, right? Well, ships aren't that fluffy, but the air inside them helps them stay light enough to float. Now let's talk about balance. You see, just because a ship can float doesn't mean it's foolproof. Ships are carefully designed to stay upright even when faced with big waves, cargo loads, and even icebergs. Well, sometimes. Most modern ships have stabilizers, essentially underwater fins that help them stay steady. It's like a ship having training wheels. They also place heavy materials low in the hull to keep the ship's center of gravity close to the waterline, which helps prevent tipping. So, if you've ever seen a cargo ship, you know they're stacked with huge containers. But here's a little secret. The crew actually strategically stacks these containers to maintain balance. Loading a ship isn't just throwing stuff on and hoping it all works out. It's a puzzle game where each piece has to be placed just right, or the whole ship could tilt or even capsize. Fun fact, a ship floats differently in salt water compared to fresh water. Salt water is denser because of all the dissolved salts, which actually gives a bit more oomph to the buoyant force. So, if our ship's been cruising the ocean and suddenly heads into a freshwater lake, it'll sit lower in the water. The ship doesn't change, but the water density does. The keel is crucial for a boat's balance and stability. Think of the keel as the boat's underwater backbone. It's a long, fin-like structure extending downward from the hull, and it serves two main purposes: counteracting sideways drift, lateral resistance. When wind hits the sails, it doesn't just push the boat forward, it also tries to push it sideways. The keel resists this sideways movement, helping the boat stay on course, maintaining balance, righting moment. The keel also keeps the boat from tipping over or heeling too much. Most keels have heavy ballast at their base, providing a low center of gravity. This weight acts as a counterbalance to the force of the wind on the sails, so when the wind pushes the boat sideways, the keel's ballast pulls the boat back upright, keeping it stable. Without a keel, a boat would be difficult to control and could easily capsize in strong winds. It's like a steady hand that keeps the boat stable, and it's essential for both balance and safety. Finally, let's face the question you're all thinking.
Hey, Sonny, how about a little ice?
Yes, ma'am, I'll bring it.
What if the ship starts leaking? Ships are built with something called watertight compartments, which work like closed rooms. If one part of the ship starts filling with water, these compartments can prevent the water from flooding the entire vessel. Think of it like putting a plastic bag around your phone in the rain. If the ship's hull gets damaged, the compartments act as lifeboats, keeping parts of the ship buoyant. But if enough compartments flood, well, let's just say the buoyant force loses the tug of war and gravity wins. RMS Titanic sank because too many compartments were breached.
Old Michigan steams like a young man's dream.
Old Michigan steams like a young man's dreams. The islands and bays are for sportsmen. Those words, sung by Gordon Lightfoot, immortalize the tragic fate of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Unlike the Titanic, which met its end with an iceberg in the icy Atlantic, the Fitzgerald succumbed to the fierce, unpredictable power of Lake Superior in November 1975. The Fitzgerald was one of the largest freighters to sail the Great Lakes, but even a vessel of her size wasn't enough to withstand a perfect storm. Towering waves, hurricane-force winds, and possibly structural damage or design flaws. She sank in minutes, taking all 29 crew members with her. These tragedies may seem different, one struck by an iceberg, the other by a relentless storm, but they share a common thread. When the forces of nature and flaws in design or circumstance collide, even the mightiest ships can meet their end.
superior sea.
Modern ships are equipped with numerous safety features to prevent sinking. Bulkheads, which are vertical partitions dividing the ship into compartments, are designed to be watertight and fire-resistant. Lifeboats and emergency procedures are standard on all passenger ships, ensuring that in the event of an emergency, passengers and crew can safely evacuate. Lessons learned from historical shipwrecks, such as the Titanic, have led to significant advancements in ship safety. The Titanic's sinking highlighted the need for more lifeboats, better communication systems, and more rigorous safety standards. Today, ships must comply with international safety regulations to ensure the highest level of safety for passengers and crew. So next time you see a ship, think about all the science that goes into keeping that giant structure afloat. Archimedes Principle, buoyant forces, density, and design, all coming together in harmony. Every floating ship out there is a small miracle of engineering. And now, you're in on the secret. That's it for today, sailors. Hopefully you now have a new appreciation for the art and science of floating. If you're still curious, or just like seeing big things not sink, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more fun ocean science. Thanks for watching, and may all your ships float. Keep your sails full and your course true.
Captain, I wish to report a mutiny.
Happy sailing.